Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Today, our guest is Dr. Sam Wilkinson. He is the wildlife vet. And today, we're going to be talking about the exotic wildlife industry, just different animal husbandry that you can do when you are darting and working with animals, drug control, and a lot more. So I encourage you to stay, but let's talk about it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Today, I have Sam Wilkinson with me. He is an exotic wildlife veterinarian. And so, Sam, if you wouldn't mind telling the listeners just kind of who you are and a little background of how you got here.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from South Texas. I was born in Corpus Christi, raised in a small town called Fremont. And after I left Fremont, when I was about 20, I moved away and I went to, I was kind of in a rough place in my life, pretty unhappy with some choices that I had made. So I actually moved to Italy for 2 years and I did some missionary work there. And then I came back, and while I was doing missionary work, met my wife, and then eventually, well, she wasn't my wife at the time, but yeah, so met her, chased her, married her, went to school, went to A&M and College Station. Got my bachelor's there, and eventually got my doctorate there. Then I went down and started working with my dad for a year at his clinic. Then I opened up a clinic in Alice, grew that, and added more vets. And then as time went on, I was doing mixed animal practice mostly, and then I started doing. I was always doing some wildlife stuff, but matter of fact, my very first job, like I was. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I had walked the stage. So I was a DVM, but my paperwork had not quite gone through yet. So there's this period where you're a doctor, but not a doctor.
Right.
My very first job was working white-tailed deer. And so it's kind of always been there from the beginning. Dr. Walt Cook at Texas A&M got me into it, and he taught me how to get started and just the basic process of it. And then I just took it and ran with it. And so, while I was focusing on growing those clinics, I was doing some exotic work, but not a lot. And then as I started or got to the point where I was not essential in the day-to-day of the practice, then that's when I really started focusing more on exotics. So basically for the past 2 years, I've been doing a lot. And for the past year, that's a lot of what I've been doing is native and exotic wildlife, mostly hoofstock.
Right. Man, that's amazing. And so you said your dad had a practice as well.
He still does. Yeah, my dad still practices. Yeah.
So do you know what got him into being a vet?
Well, the story that he tells was that he was working with his dad, and I think it was particularly impactful because his dad passed away when he was young, and so that memory became a core memory. And so he was working with his dad, and they had a sick cow, and he was able to give her a medication, and she got better, and saved her life, call it. And so I think that experience of having saved the cow's life, and then that being one of the core memories of his dad, got him to really take that and grow it. And eventually, he started practice. He's been It's been, I don't know, over 40 years that he's practiced.
Wow. Yeah. So did you have like a core memory like that, or that you were like watching your dad and you're like, man, I've got to be a vet?
Well, I don't. I don't have like this memory. It was like, oh yeah, this makes so much sense. I've always been attracted to the sciences and to life and to biology, and I always felt that I was being reminded of something rather than learning it for the first time. And so when I would learn about the way something worked, the way a chemical interacted with the body, or the way that someone was born or how to fix something, like I don't know exactly how to explain it. I would feel things like just in my mind, like, yeah, that makes sense. I remember that, as opposed to like, man, this is the first time I've ever heard it.
Right.
And so I didn't really have as much trouble remembering those things when I would learn a new concept. And so I originally kind of fought it some. I thought I wanted to be an engineer, and then I realized I was better at breaking mechanical things and fixing them. And then I thought I wanted to be an accountant until I learned what they really do. And I'm like, oh man, there's no way I'm going to just go through taxes and go and try and find embezzlement and stuff.
Oh, I started this company so I didn't have to sit behind a desk, and that's what I do 90% of the time now.
Yeah. And so, so then, I thought about being a human medical doctor, and I realized that there would be a big problem with me because there would come a day when there was someone that I didn't think should be treated. And I know, the whole, you shall not judge, but God dang it, there's some bad people out there that I don't want to have any part of. And so I thought, okay, well, pediatrics, right? Kids they're innocent. And, I really feel like I could be a good pediatrician. And then, I started, I had always been around vet med my whole life, helping with my dad and whatnot. But so there was kind of that moment of time, well, do I go the medical route or do I go the veterinary route? And I ultimately chose the veterinary route. And though if I had to do it all over again, it's been a challenging road, a lot of, things you have to accomplish to be able to do it. So I don't regret doing it at all. I'm very happy that I did it, but man, it's tough. And I don't know that I have it in me for a second round to go all the way through it again. Right.
And there's something about this industry, man, that like we just talked about it the other day, because we're very methodical in what we try to do and just in all practices. But I was like, man, I feel like we've done everything right. It's just this industry is hard. It's something about the whitetail and exotic ranchers, the owners, the animals. But yeah, you're right. I don't know if I would enjoy it as much if I was doing corporate videos or whatever else. But yeah, this industry, it's the biggest blessing and the biggest curse that we have.
Well, what I've learned is that one of the beautiful things about this industry is they're very protective of it, and there's a very strong culture, and it has gone through cycles of kind of being, with a healthy culture and an unhealthy culture, where like there's the backbiting and the thieving and then on the other hand, and lying. And then on the other hand, there's the helping and assisting and honest people. But the thing that I've really come to appreciate is that if you don't know something, that's okay.
Right.
Just be honest, be humble. And all you have to have is a love for the animal, love for the industry, love for the outdoors, love for nature, love for conservation, and the people that are in it will welcome you with open arms.
Right.
And they will teach you, and they will help you be better. They will help educate you, and they will show you the ropes. They'll give you their contacts, and that's really it. If you love it, then you will be just fine.
Right. That's why I wanted to start this podcast too, is like, I grew up, but under a lot of assumptions. My grandparents, my dad, they would just kind of be like, all right, go do it. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. They're like, oh, you'll figure it out. And I was like, okay. So there's a lot of things that could have been prevented, but even just walking through, and like, I might catch you today, because again, I'm not very educated on all the drugs that are out there, much less the chemical compounds and how it interacts with the body and, whatever that may be. But there may be some terms that I ask you to break down, or, hey, let's go back for a second, just because I would like for people to have a better understanding, much less I would like to learn about it. And so when you said that you were doing mixed animals, what were those? What I don't know what that is. Is that just like horses, birds, dogs, cats? And then with that, how did that lead you into the exotics? You said that was a doctor that you were, or the guy you learned under at A&M?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start from the first question. So there's a few different aspects of veterinary medicine that you can focus on. So some people, just kind of starting at the top, are you going to be a generalist or a specialist? And a specialist will focus on very limited things, but they will go very deep in that topic. So for example, there are specialists that only focus on like dog, cat, horse, heart. That's it. Just the heart. And there's some of those that don't even work on large animals at all, that they only do dog and cat hearts. And they will go and do very advanced, are capable of very aggressive procedures.
Wow.
Or there's some people, they only do dog and cat orthopedics. They won't remove a spleen. They won't fix a diaphragm. They won't remove a gallbladder. They will do a dog knee.
Wow.
And so those people have a passion that they've developed that is extremely focused and necessary, right? If someone came and said, "Hey, my dog hurt its toe," and they were like, I want to fix it. Well, most of the time, either just leave it alone or cut it off.
Right.
In my world, and but there's a specialist out there that this is a real world example. The dog had a dislocated toe, right? So the ligaments on the side of its toe were damaged, and the owner wanted them fixed. And so we went and connected with a specialist at A&M, and he went and he fixed those dang ligaments on the side of a toe.
What does that cost?
Oh, heck, I don't even know. I don't even know, man.
I don't like my dogs that much.
Yeah, more than I would want to spend. But,
yeah.
But it was important to him. The fact was
Right.
that this person had spent their life developing their craft, right? So that's at the top of the pyramid, if you will, of kind of differentiating. So steering away from specialists, because that's kind of a separate topic. So generalists, they're going to know a lot of things about a lot of different animals, and we kind of act as the quarterback to help point people in the right direction and kind of the first line of defense. So that's what I'm a generalist. And on your question, you asked, what do you specialize in? Well, in medicine, that's a protected term. So I'm not allowed to project myself as a specialist because there are people who are specialists and they've done what it takes to get that designator. And so mine would be considered like a focus, if you will. And so mixed. So then you have mixed animal, small animal, large animal, and exotics. Now, traditionally, when people think about exotics in that context, they are generally referring to like the pocket pet, bird, reptile, snake, and they're not often thinking about what we're talking about.
Sables, bongos,
we're talking about exactly bongo, giraffe, elephant.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the skill sets needed are very different. You need to have I'll go into that in a second, but so small animals typically referring to like dogs and cats and occasionally some things outside of that, but like a ferret kind of might fall into that category. And then large animals going to be cattle, sheep, goats, horses, things like that, llamas. Some people might even classify that, but a lot of times llamas and alpacas kind of fall in there. And then mixed animal is going to be those domestic species combined. And so with the exotics that I do, basically what I have to do is get the knowledge that I have of the domestic species, the large animal domestic species, and combine that with the information about working with wild animals, and you have to kind of put them together so that you can effectively practice. And the question that you had, I believe it was about, how did I get into it? Or
yeah, like if you didn't grow up around exotics, like it was normal to me to walk outside. My grandparents had monkeys, baboons, panthers, tigers.
Oh, wow.
And so like I grew up thinking that was normal.
Okay.
But how does someone, because I know, and we'll talk about it later, but I know there's a limited number of vets that specialize, or I don't know if I can say specialize, but focus on exotics.
Yeah.
And so what made you be like, man, I'm going to focus on exotics?
Yeah. Well, I think I kind of started at the top of the, I don't know, kind of at the top of the exotic echelon. So my dad, he was instrumental in establishing a herd of black rhinos in South Texas. And so I got experience with those. And then when I went off to school, I learned about, like I said, from Dr. Cook, I learned that there was this whole other aspect of working with wild animals. And initially I didn't think that that would be the direction of my career, but I was attracted to it. I thought it was a lot of fun, but I was like, man, you can't make a living doing that. It's cool. It's fun, but it's just something I'm going to do if I'm not working with things that I can make a living doing.
Right.
And so I would just do those jobs every once in a while, and they'd work out and I'd have a good time and make some money. But then I had the opportunity to start working more with some bison. So I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. It's like working with cattle, but they have a different temperament, different personality, but you treat them like a cow pretty much.
Right.
And then, I had the opportunity to start working with white rhinos. So like I said, it really started at the top of the echelon. And so that was a big turning point for me is, I found myself working with these animals and working with the owner of those animals. And we worked on this massive project of getting them all the way across from Namibia. And so it really became something special. And so I was like, man, and he kind of, the owner of those animals really ignited the passion for me because he was so passionate about it. And so it really was kind of set in stone for me. It's like, man, that is what I want to do. I want to work with these types of animals that nobody else is working with, that a lot of people don't know how to do. There's a level of danger, but if you do it right, then, you mitigate most of that.
Right.
And so, yeah. That's kind of how it took off.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, you kind of just like passed over that. Like, seems like a huge milestone of like, because what does that process look like of bringing, because we can't bring animals over anymore. And if you can, I think it's a lengthy, and you have to go through a zoo or something. But what started that to bring black rhinos over?
Yeah, so that was back in like the 90s when they were doing that. So I was just a young pup then. So I don't have all the information for that, but I
know I'm going a little off script, but
that's okay. But the basic concept of bringing these protected animals over is you're going to have to work with the host government. You're going to have to work with U.S. and essentially it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And then you're going to have to work with CITES, which I can't remember the exact name or exactly what that stands for. Give me 1 second. I will get that for you. So basically, when you're getting those animals over, you have to go through a few things. You're working with the host government, generally somewhere maybe like in Asia or Africa or, some country like that. And they're going to have some sort of regulatory agency within that country that you're going to have to work with. And it's going to be dependent on what it's called is going to be dependent on what country you're talking about. And so you're going to have to hire someone to help you figure that out, or you're going to have to figure that out. And, but most of the time people kind of work with some intermediary that's done that before.
Right.
And then you're going to have to work with the U.S. and that's usually like U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And then you're going to have to work with your state. So there's like the Texas Animal Health Commission here in Texas, for example, because you're going to have federal regulation and state regulation that determines what you can do. And so you have to line all those up. So that's a challenge. And then you're going to have to work with CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. So that's a mouthful, but yeah, people just call it CITES. So basically what CITES is like, NATO is to, military support and aid, as CITES is to the control of these endangered species. And they make recommendations to countries that help regulate the trade of these animals. And so CITES makes a recommendation to this country or that country and says, hey, you should do this with the animal. And so that's kind of how those decisions are made. And so as you, and then you get to the local level where, ultimately a lot of it gets tied back to money, where you have, some individual that's in control at some level, whether it's a private landowner or if in some of these countries where you're, it's a little, where the social structure is a little bit less organized, you might be paying some regional individual or some other government official.
Yeah, because there's like even I can't I don't think I can say, but there's you might even be dealing with like a prince or something that has
Sometimes, yeah.
animals on his property. I don't know what they call it over there, but
Yeah, well, so a lot of times if you're going to make big decisions, you're going to end up working with somebody high up in government that approves it, and working with like a king or a prince. If you're going to make a big move, sometimes that is what you have to do.
right. Yeah, that's crazy. Do you know if they still have those rhinos and their offspring here that were brought over from the black rhinos?
They do, yeah.
Man, that's amazing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's a super powerful determination, I think, on the people in this industry, because I don't know any others besides zoos that are taking that and either coming out of pocket or doing whatever to be able to help bring these animals over. And the other question I had on that is, what are the components that people are not wanting to bring over when bringing animals overseas? Like what diseases or what things what are they concerned about bringing animals over?
Well, so there was a comment that you made, talking about like the kind of being impressed with these individuals, and that is absolutely true. I'm totally impressed with the decisions that certain individuals make to try and help these animals at a private level, and because like many people, they'll focus on the day to day. It's like, hey, I need to pay my car off. I need to make sure that I have my mortgage paid, that I get my kids' college saved up for, and that I get my 401k going, and retirement, and dealing with health insurance. Well, when you've had those things when you have done what it takes to get those things taken care of, then you're like, okay, well, I don't want to travel more. I want to go into the kind of a next step. Well, okay, well, and then what about when that's taken care of? I want to maybe own this thing or own that thing. Okay, well, what about when that's taken care of? You've done what it took to satisfy those. Well, at some point, there's certain individuals out there that, well, I want to save the species. I can do something about that.
Right.
And it's truly magnificent. It's amazing. And then to go to your next question that you mentioned, like, what are they afraid of? Well, sometimes when you bring an animal over, it's not always a good thing. Like, there are animals that have come over that end up wrecking local ecosystems. Now, right off the top of my head, I don't have a perfect one to give you all the details, but the one that comes to mind, this is, I think it was like in Florida or Louisiana, they brought over some snakes and they got out, and all of a sudden there's like pythons where there shouldn't be pythons, and it's like a big problem. And it's like open season, and they are thriving.
Right.
The snakes are, because they are super happy, and they're wrecking that ecosystem.
Right. Man.
And so that's one example. Is just sometimes the existence of the animal in a place where it wasn't established goes and hurts other animals. So that's one. The spread of disease. So there's some animals that have diseases that people wouldn't want spread. So there's STDs that they can share. There's blood parasites. There's some countries that wouldn't even want our white-tailed deer. I know it sounds kind of weird. You're like, what? They're awesome. Yeah, but we have something called meningeal worm, right? So if you have a white-tailed deer and you have the right, or whatever, the snail that pairs with that, then the country may say, well, we don't want those in our country, because if we get meningeal worm established, that could go and wipe out a bunch of their animals. So there's the spread of disease, and then the effect that animal has on whatever local ecosystem it's going to. Those are some things to consider.
Yeah. So when you focus, because I feel like a lot of, well, let's talk about this first. Why do you think there's such a minimal number of people going into the exotic industry specifically to be a veterinarian?
Well, this is my personal opinion. So a lot of times when you are talking about the root of the problem, whether it's in politics, business, or in this case, veterinary medicine, a lot of it ties back to money in one way or another. And I was never, excuse me, I was never told that you can make a living doing this type of stuff. So that's one thing. Knowledge on it is scarce. The development of the industry is booming. When I started school back in, let's see, when I started school, I graduated in 2017. I mean, this industry was not as big as it is now.
Right.
I mean, there were some people that had some animals, and that was interesting, but there were not animals moving like they are today.
Right.
And so that takes time for an industry to boom, and then for the associated industries to grow with it. And so there are some things where it's like, okay, if you need to adapt a trailer to become an exotic trailer, well, that's just a slight modification. Well, yeah, but what if you have a lead time of 8 years or 4 years for someone to become a veterinarian and to go and actually get through vet school that does have a passion about this? Because maybe there was someone that wasn't even thinking about being a vet that wants to do this. Well, now they have 8 years of school until they get out. So
Right.
so it's going to take some time for that to respond. So that's one. It's just some time, or those are a couple things there. Some more things. There's while I was in school, there wasn't like this big focus to say, oh yeah, well, you can work on domestics and you can work on the fish and birds and type of exotics and reptiles type of exotics, but you can also work on exotic hoofstock. And like that wasn't really a big push. So I didn't even when I was going through school, I just happened to be going through it the perfect time when this industry was booming. And then I was able to develop those, large animal domestic species skills, and then kind of transition that into wildlife. So I just happened to be there at the right time while I was catching the wave. But those are some issues there. Their lack of knowledge. So because a lot of these species that people are talking about, they're not native to here, that a lot of people have never even seen them.
Right.
I could go and list a handful of species, and there's most people, they have no idea what they even are.
Right.
Like I go and say bongo, and they don't think $100,000 animal. They go and think this, little cheap set
African
of drums.
drum,
Cheap set of drums, They think that if you say antelope, that there's only one type of antelope. They don't even know that antelope is a whole group. And that,
Right.
like, if I say, well, I was catching African antelope, because I'm trying to tell them what I was doing, because they're not going to know that it was a lechwe or an impala or whatever,
Right.
And so then with there's a lot of lack of knowledge there, and then there's there's fear. There are people that have started getting fear of veterinarians, not from the public, but the veterinarians' fear, where they started getting into it, and then they started getting involved with controlled substances and controlled substance prescription use on these ranches, and the amount of drugs that is necessary to operate this kind of industry, and they just feel uncomfortable with it. And because like the penalties, if you don't do your records right, manageable financially. Someone can make a mistake, and then you get a little fine and you handle it. It's not a felony. Like, it's not jail time. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties if you don't do it right, like it would be if you're breaking a federal controlled substance law. And it's not jail time. You get a letter from the board, and hey, you need to improve this. You need to do some more continuing education, and you need to improve. Yeah, totally. But the penalties are very severe for messing up. If and it's not intentional, right? It's not like this bad criminal trying to do things right. But if you don't if you don't do your documents right, even if you are a good person trying to do a good thing, but you don't have your documents right, you didn't log these things, penalty, and it's substantial. So yeah, there's fear of that, and then fear of the illicit use and of diversion. That's kind of the key word that these agencies use is diversion, right? So when I first got into it, I'm like, that's kind of a weird word, but you need to just learn that this is this is the word that they use to convey when there is an intent for the end use of that controlled drug, whatever it may be. Anytime that drug is not used for that specific intent, that is classified as diversion. So there's this fear of contributing to diversion.
Interesting. Yeah. So in the exotic industry, what are the main drugs that people use? And specifically, I guess in what I've known them as is knockdown drugs. But I guess could you explain those drugs and then also kind of tie that into what does knockdown drug mean for sedation?
Yeah, sure. So the most common drugs that are used are medetomidine, butorphanol, azapirone. That's kind of your BAM combination. So your butorphanol, B, azapirone, A, medetomidine, M. There's ketamine. There's tyletamine and zolazepam, which people call tilazol.
Mm-hmm.
So ketamine is a drug, and then tilazol is a combination of two drugs, but it's tyletamine, which is similar to ketamine. And then there's you have some stronger drugs. Well, before I get into that, there's also midazolam. That's a common one. And then as far as your stronger drugs, there's atorphine, there's thiofentanil. Some people use xylazine as well. That's one of your, going back to the other ones. Some people will use xylazine. Those are the most common ones.
What are the drugs? So, well, I guess before I even dive into that is, so on these ranches, people are allowed to get scripts from vets to help work their animals, medicate them if something goes wrong. Can you walk through what that process looks like? And then also what drugs are they allowed to get scripts on?
Yeah, sure. So you asked about knockdown just a second ago, and then I'll walk you through the process. So typically when someone is saying like a capture drug or a knockdown drug, what they are referring to is a combination of drugs that you administer, whether you almost never hand inject, but you're administering maybe with a pulse syringe, a blowgun, and usually a dart gun that will safely and humanely sedate and then eventually anesthetize that animal so that you can safely handle it and, check its hooves, check its teeth, perform a physical exam, administer medications, and then, if necessary, move that animal from one location to another, whether it's one pasture to another, whether it's off your neighbor's pasture or it's off the highway for public safety, or away from another animal that's it's fighting with, or even if it's to another ranch. So then we ask your question one more time. What is the process?
Yeah, what's the process of, because ranches are, for, again, trying to state it in the fact that without assuming anything, ranches are able to get scripts from veterinarians. And what does that process look like? And then what drugs can ranches get, and which ones do you have to have a veterinary for?
Sure. So basically, the state requires that the veterinarian have a relationship with that client, a legal established relationship. So they have a relationship with that client and with that patient. Now, in the state of Texas, we are able to treat large animals as a herd. And that is a foreign concept in the small animal world because you're talking about an individual dog.
Right.
Like, you don't make recommendations for groups of dogs. You make it for one dog. But in the large animal world, and that's essentially what this is, it's kind of being treated like that. You can treat animals as a herd. And so you're treating the health of the herd. And yes, you will focus on individual animals, but as it relates to the herd as a whole. So they want a veterinarian to go out to the location where the animals are. They want to speak with the vet to speak with the owner and develop that relationship by evaluating the herd and performing a herd health exam. And basically you're looking at the overall health of that herd, and you are helping the owner learn about possible problems that they could have and the direction that they want the herd to go, to determine what the goals of the herd are and how to accomplish those goals. And if the use of controlled substances, in this case, since that's a discussion, if the use of controlled substances is even appropriate, they want the vet to, so that's establishing what is classified as a VCPR. Okay. And there's some legal definitions for that you can, or that a veterinarian will know on how to establish that. But there's some things you have to satisfy, but that's mostly it as far as establishing the VCPR. So you have to have that established. And then from there, you need to do safety training. It's just, to me, it's irresponsible for a veterinarian to prescribe out something that's dangerous to someone if you don't even teach them how to be safe. And so they need to know the dangers of the drugs that they're using. They need to know about the dangers to humans, dangers to animals, and then they need to be educated on the laws. So to me, it's a team effort, right? I don't want a client that I'm working with to do something illegal, because then that's going to be a problem for me too. I don't want them to get in trouble, but I also don't want to get in trouble. Yeah. And so, because, if a client that I'm working with is breaking the law, all of a sudden it's assumed that I'm breaking the law, even though I'm doing my best not to. I don't want to, right? So I take efforts to abide by the law, but if you're associating with people who are breaking the law, automatically you kind of look sketchy.
Right.
So yeah, there's education on that. And then you get a plan together for what that controlled substance is going to be used for and how to use it, and make sure that the owner knows when to use it, when not to use it, where they can use it. And then after that, let's see. So we've kind of walked through. Yeah. So then, okay. And then you asked what? I was trying to remember what your question was.
Sorry, I know I asked too many at once.
That's okay. I just trying to remember your question. So then, what drugs can they use? So there are some, established drug combinations that have become the standard in capture. So there's BAM, which is one, and there's NOx, which has different combinations of butorphanol, izapiron, and medetomidine. There's Remix, which also has different combinations, but it removes the izapiron. And then there's like MKB, MKBM, MK. So most of the time when people are referring to these, you're talking about drugs that are like when you use like the first letter, it's the first letter of the drugs that they contain. So like MK is medetomidine and ketamine. MK2 is essentially those, but it's double strength. Not exactly, but kind of. There's MKB, which is like medetomidine, ketamine, butorphanol. Well, MKB2 is double. Then you have like NOx, which is, a stronger form, with the butorphanol, izapiron, medetomidine, and that one has lidocaine in it. And so yeah, a lot of times people are talking about these drugs by their base components. Like MKBM adds midazolam. And so yeah, we will a lot of times refer to it by the first letter of the drugs that it contains, just for quick reference.
Yeah, because I don't know if I could say all those, much less spell them.
Yeah.
So.
So then you asked, well, what drugs are necessary for a veterinarian to be on the premises? So to me, it's necessary for a veterinarian to be on the premises if the owner doesn't know how to use those drugs. Like if the owner wants to learn how to use those drugs, then it's the responsibility of the veterinarian to make sure that the owner is able to do it safely. Like the first time that owner ever uses that drug should not be alone. Right. Well, first off, you should never dart alone. You always need to have somebody there with you to help make sure that you're safe and you don't accidentally get exposed. But yeah, if that person doesn't know how to do it, then they need to get taught by a veterinarian. So just as an example, recently there was someone with a sick animal, and they had never darted before ever, and they wanted to learn. They want to be a good, responsible owner, and I think they need to learn to help be able to manage their herd in the event of an emergency. So I went out there and I showed him how to load the gun, showed him how to load the dart, and then we went up to the animal. I showed him, okay, well, this is how much medicine we're going to administer to this animal. Here's kind of the range. Here's what I'm thinking. This is what I would do if I wanted to increase the dose or decrease the dose. These are some factors that I would consider. And then, dart the animal. Okay, this is what I'm thinking, and I walk them through the process, right? So that's for somebody who's never done it before. And they need to learn. And to me, it's irresponsible for a veterinarian to just prescribe something like that out to someone that's never done it, and like a lot of these people, that are in this industry, they may have raised animals before, and some of them may have not, but they're not veterinarians. They for sure don't have emergency training, most of them.
Right.
To save somebody's life in the event that something catastrophic happened, or to save an animal's life, or even how to recognize the problems happening with their animal. I mean, a lot of times people don't even check if the animal's breathing. They don't check if the heart rate is still going. And then, well, the animal died. Well, why? Because no one was looking at it, that it was breathing. You don't get very long of not breathing before it's game over.
Yeah.
Right. And, if that animal's heart rate was at 30 beats per minute for the last 30 minutes or 45 minutes while you were moving it, well, that means that there's not enough blood going to the kidneys. Well, you don't get very long of not having blood going to the kidneys before you're going to go into kidney failure, right? So, it must have been capture myopathy. Well, no, it didn't have blood going to the kidneys. And why? Because you didn't listen to the heart.
Right.
So there's some things like that, that people need to learn. And so going to those drugs that you do need a veterinarian for, that's going to be like carfentanil, which is not established here in the U.S. anymore, but thiafentanil and atorphine. And so those thiafentanil and atorphine are going to be the main ones that you have to have a vet on site for. So then that kind of brings up the discussion, well, why would you do that? Why is it better? Well, there's some animals, they just do better, a lot better, when using these super strong opiates. And so basically these drugs are many, many times stronger than anything on the human market. And there's absolutely no human use, period. Like there's no functional human use that you would ever need. It's like thiafentanil or atorphine for. And so that's why, like, most of the human world's never even heard of it.
Right.
And in the veterinary world, it's so regulated and so controlled that most veterinarians have never even had the opportunity to try it. So that kind of goes to your earlier question about, why are there so few? Well, a lot of vets don't even know how to use these drugs.
Right.
Like they've never even seen them. They don't even know how to get the license to get them.
So on that, is there any public information, whether it's at colleges, universities, online, whatever it may be, that educates ranch owners on, I guess, more so of the importance of it, but then two, that's most people wouldn't even know how to, like, if I asked, I think 90% of the people I've ever met in this industry, what does BAM stand for? They would just say, knocks an animal down.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know the components or anything, but is there any educational stuff out there that's for that? Like just to educate the general public or other veterinarians?
Sure. So, I do appreciate the softball, so I'm gonna do a shameless plug here. So I've been working on doing courses. So right now I have a zebra course out where I teach people about the drugs, and I teach people how to do it, teach people some tips. So I have a zebra course out, and I'm working on others. So that is one source. Okay. So as far as other really good sources, there's a book by Dr. Krieger, The Wildlife Mobilization Handbook. It's really good. There's another one by Koch and Burroughs. I can't remember the exact name. It's out of South Africa. It's a bit of a challenge to get, but it's really good. We can provide a link or something.
Yeah.
After, and then let's see. There's.
It's what the YouTubers say. The link's in the bio.
Oh yeah. So a lot of it is working with a good veterinarian. I mean, honestly, most of the information that I have, and this is a big challenge in the industry, which is why I decided, like, hey, I want to try and create a course. Is a lot of it is word of mouth.
Right.
There's a Safe Capture series out of California that's a good series. I I know Dr. Krieger has a course that kind of gives you a rundown of capture. There's another one, I forget his name. I haven't personally taken it, but I've heard good things that's a capture course. There's trainings in South Africa all the time where you can go over there and get trained by veterinarians over there, and you basically pay for your flight, and then you buy this package and you're there for a certain number of days, and they go and do certain captures, and they line captures up so that they can go and do that kind of work, because there's obviously wildlife galore over there, and so
right.
So from what I understand, they kind of use the funds to go and help animals and get more opportunities that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise,
right.
To be able to provide that kind of experience.
Because there's not really any courses like face to face. I think I've heard of one someone put on, and I couldn't even try to recall who did it. But there's no courses like face to face or in class in the U.S. that.
Well, the Safe Capture series is in the U.S.
Okay.
So that is available. But I mean, I teach people all the time, but it's and so if you want to call that a course, you can. But I mean, really, it's just one-on-one. Because that's what you need. To really get good, you need someone to work with you to start with and get you down the right path, and then a lot of times that you start developing organically. Where now there's people that I work with that probably capture more than I do.
Right.
Because they developed a passion for it, kind of going back to that love that I was telling you about, where they've developed a love for it, and they realize, like, man, this is, not only am I doing good things, but this is actually really fun.
Yeah.
And it's not this cowboy thing that people talk about. Like, you don't go wrestle these animals. Like, you're going to hurt the animal and you're going to get hurt.
Right.
I mean, like there was somebody not too long ago that tried even capturing an aoudad, and they aoudad, rammed him and fatally injured him, So I mean, so minor injuries happen all the time, but fatal injuries can happen too. And so it's definitely not something to play around with, but but like I said, that love develops that passion. And so then these like I said, some of the people that I work with, they have started capturing even more than me.
Yeah, it's rewarding, kind of how you said, like going through. And I remember being part of catch jobs for animals that were hurt, and being able to watch people literally stitch animals back together out in the field that either got hit by another animal or a poacher came by and shot them, and they were able to the vet was able to do what they do, and watching them bring this animal back to life is just, it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
So if you're able to be out in the field and just help this animal, and then you can come back months later and watch them. And so we get to see that a lot going out to ranches, and one day there will be an animal in the barn, like a Sitatunga with a broken leg, and we're like, oh no, what happened? And they're kind of saying it and how they casted it and everything else. And then we're like, hey, where did that animal go a couple months ago? They're like, yeah, can you tell which one he is out in the pen? We're like, no. He's like, yeah, it's because we did good. And so it's really rewarding to be able to watch these people have such a passion to care for the animals that otherwise would have probably passed away if they didn't have the people who had the love and passion to care for them.
Yeah. And you got to get creative with that kind of stuff. Cause when you're there in the situation, in almost every situation I've ever been in, I did not have every resource that I would like to have, like you can only walk around with so many boxes and only put so many stuff in your little stash spots before you run out of space. And so you have to get creative.
Yeah. Cause I don't think I've ever been at a place where I've seen an animal with that, just because you can't plan a broken leg. And so when you see that and they're like, oh, let me get my x-ray and just see exactly where this is. And you're kind of guessing. And that's the other part of where the skill combined with experience is, you have to determine, hey, depending where it's broken, how it's broken, did it break the skin, did it not? And then making that decision, do we amputate or do we let it heal?
Yep.
And because if you make the wrong call on that, I mean, it could lead to infections and other things that I'm not educated on, but I've seen it to where they tried one thing and it wasn't the proper call, and it ended up getting an infection and dying. But it's still, they wasted their time. I don't want to say wasted. If you're trying to benefit an animal, it's never wasted. But it's just a hard call when you don't have all the resources readily available.
Yeah, well, I mean, any vet or they got to get over that fear real quick.
Right.
Because you're never going to have all the resources. I mean, I recently got called out to an area near Carrizo Springs to do some work. And, so I flew out there and I did the job. And, I know this sounds kind of funny, but like the animal passed away a little bit before I got there. Right. So then it turned from trying to save the animal to trying to figure out why it died. Well, I didn't bring my set of knives, and nobody had a really good knife for me to quickly take samples of this animal and perform. We call it a necropsy, which is an autopsy, but on an animal. So auto is a human to human, right? So that's an autopsy. But we call it a necropsy when we're doing it on animals, right? So I didn't have a good set of knives to work on it. So what did we do? We figured it out. And I'm sitting there and I'm cutting, and I have someone over there and he's doing his best to sharpen the knives as I go through them. So I'm like cutting this and then handing it to him, and he's trying to sharpen it, and I'm using the next knife, and while I'm collecting my samples out there, and I'm opening up with tree trimmers, to try and get this thing right. So you got to get over that fear real quick of you have to get creative.
Absolutely.
That farm boy creativity.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, and some people that might listen to this, I don't know, too many, I won't say liberals listening to it, but like they might be like, oh, that's so mean that you're doing that. But in reality, that's saving the other herd, like, or the rest of the animals in that herd. And just because it's not like a Grey's Anatomy doctor room of what I think most people think, you're going to do a necropsy on this Impala female or whatever. Well, it's like, well, that female brings value. Like, I love EWA's deal, conservation through commerce. So like if that female's $20,000, $30,000, you being able to take all these samples, send them off, figure out what it is, has the potential to save the whole other herd, depending on what they're sick with or what they died from. But yeah, and I think just because it's not pretty, because you're having to be farm boy creative, it's so rewarding though, being able to go like, man, this isn't professionally known everywhere, but there's so many times that people just ask, hey, how did you do that? And they're like, oh man, I never would have thought of that, or I never would have put two and two together. Yeah. But it might save the next guy
100%
when he might not have a vet there.
Well, and so with the that creativity that you have to employ, like, a lot of the good people in this industry share that freely once they realize that you love what they love, and going back to your point on conservation through commerce, for me personally, I try not to think about the monetary value of the animal. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would get a little bit psyched out. If somebody told me like, oh, you're working on this $100,000 animal, I'm sitting there thinking like, man, if it doesn't go well, are they going to like try and charge me for it or something like that? And I just don't want to get psyched out about that. And so I give every animal that I work with 100%, whether I'm working with one that someone would consider of low monetary value or working with one that would be considered of high monetary value. Right. I mean, I'm bringing all of my resources to it, and it's, yes, it is for the health of the animal, but that's because of who I want to be. Right. Like, I want to be the person that helps the animal live, right? That helps it have babies. And, and don't get me wrong, like I am not this, bleeding heart hippie, that's going to be like, oh, no hunting, conservation. Like, no, I'm not like that. I just get more joy from, when people are like, hey, I hunted this animal. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. You have the trophy on the wall. Like, I'd love to see it. I think it's cool. Right. But, my next question is, have you ever seen one have babies? Right. Have you ever raised one? Right. Like, have you ever had it grow up in your field, and then you named it, and then, even if you didn't name it, you got to see this herd and you have babies. Now, when you're driving through the field, you're not just looking up to see how big your big ones are. You're looking on the ground to see if any are stashed. Right. Yeah. Like, we just posted a video today of last time we were driving around together. There was a sable calf. I mean, it was fresh. I mean, still wet. And we drove that field, and he either was ducking down or we didn't see it. And I was able to get
10 feet from
Of
it.
course,
And we're
yeah.
filming it and everything.
Yeah,
and
you can get right up on them. It's dangerous. You better be ready for it if you do. It's funny. It brings up a funny story. So I was at a ranch one time. We were doing a site visit. And I wasn't even there for the calf, but so I was doing the site visit, and we're talking herd and drugs and stuff like that. And the owner pulls up and to this, we're riding in his side by side, and he pulls up and he sees this sable calf. And he's like, "Oh, perfect, a new one." Right. So he's super excited. And so he goes over there and he sneaks up. He's crawling up behind it. The calf doesn't see him, because the calf is trying to just stay still. Right. If you get close to it, it will, and it sees you, it'll run off. But so he's trying to be sneaky, and he ends up grabbing this back leg, gets a hold of it and picks it up. All of a sudden the calf's like, "Brr, brr," starts freaking out. And then this herd of like 30 sable start looking at us, and they are not afraid of us. And they're probably like 100 yards off. They come running at us, and he's like, "Hurry, tell me what the gender is. Tell me what the gender is." And I'm like looking, and I see what it is. It's like, "It's a boy." And he's like, "That's the wrong answer." And he puts it down, and it runs off. And the sable herd, he's like, "We got to get out of here." So anyway, the herd comes over, and they're going to let us know that that it was not okay.
Right.
and so we boogie out of there real quick. But yeah, that's the wrong answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Those mamas with those little calves, man, they are protective.
Oh yeah.
Like there's been times when we're in buggies and we just see a mom being real, like on patrol, and we're like, "Oh, she's got a calf somewhere," because she wasn't acting like that last week.
Yeah.
And we've been charged a few times, and we're like, "All right, we need to go to the other side of the ranch."
Yep. Yeah. There's certain times, where a male or a female will decide that you're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just go away. I mean, they don't want to hurt you. They don't want to mess with you. They just want you not to be there.
Yeah. They just want to protect their little one.
Yeah. So like I said, I try not to really think about, going back to the earlier discussion, I try not to really think about what the monetary value is. Right. And I just think about the value of that life to me, because I want to be a winner.
Right.
I want to accomplish the goal, and I want to help that animal thrive and grow and be healthy and have babies and enjoy life.
Right.
And to me, that's doing my best all the time.
Right.
And, if I do hope that the people that I'm working with are able to continue the business, and that does involve, trade and commerce of these animals in one way or another.
Right.
And, on that note, I try and celebrate their wins.
Right.
And, I don't ever go buy anything. I don't own any exotics,
Right.
I work with them on other people's ranches, but, I go to the sales and try and celebrate the wins, saying, "Hey man, I just saw you sold this. That's wonderful. Congratulations." Right. Happy for you to celebrate their wins. So I do celebrate the wins with them when I can.
Right.
But yeah, if I thought, man, this animal's a $500,000 animal or whatever, I would get all wigged out, and I just don't really want to think about it.
Yeah, that's like when they say, like, when you're hunting, they're like, "Don't look at the rack. Don't look how big he is." And same deal is like, you have to dart every animal like it's a normal animal. And because I know people that are like, "Man, I don't want to dart a bongo, or I don't want to dart a Cape Buffalo cow," or which I feel like a Cape Buffalo cow is big enough that's like, if you miss that, you're just a poor shot, because they're giant animals. Well,
the darting is not the hard part. The keeping them alive and keeping them from injuring themselves is the hard part. That's where the experience comes in, and
right.
In recognizing that you need to do something, that there's a train wreck coming, and you need to do something about it to avoid that. And
so what are the most common things, like whether it is a giraffe, which that could be a whole different thing, but when you're knocking an animal down, what are the most common things that go wrong?
Well, when you're, sorry about that. So I would say getting overheated in South Texas is probably the most common.
And what are signs for that?
So breathing too fast, tongue hanging out, open mouth breathing. They have this look in their eyes of being worried and concerned, but I don't want to make the silly face that some of them will
Right.
make, but I mean, like literally, if you see an animal, a deer, and it has its mouth open, and its tongue is hanging out,
Right.
and it is salivating, that animal is very stressed,
Mm.
and it is very overheated, and you should not dart that animal. Like it is likely that it's going to die. It could die even without being darted, but if you do dart it, it's very high likelihood.
Yeah.
Because the effects of these drugs, and it's especially when you're using like I don't want to target any one specific company, but like a BAM type protocol or a metatomidine based protocol, because that's because you'll have alpha 2 based protocols which use metatomidine, and then you have opiate based protocols which use more of the ultra potent opiates. So when you're using a metatomidine based protocol, that really jacks up their ability to regulate their temperature or thermoregulate. And so that getting overheated, like with the ambient temperature and being hot or running them too much, and then giving them something that compromises their ability to cool themselves. I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster. So overheating is by far the most common. And then the regurgitating, they're going to go down. They're going to get in a position, and these animals are programmed to eat food and go and gather, to go somewhere, sit, and then they'll bring their food up and they will chew it, and they chewing their cud, if you will, and then they will re-swallow. Right, so this kind of process. So they're programmed to do that. So what that does is all of these animals that we are handling, unless they're pen raised, have eaten it recently. And so you have a full belly that is in an animal that is programmed to bring that food up, and they salivate a lot. And so when you get that stuff up in the mouth, it can block the airway, right? So that anybody that's done CPR training, they've heard the ABCDs, right? So you got airway, right? So that blocks the airway. And then that kind of brings you into one of the next big problems is your breathing, right? So people don't even check breathing, right? So you only get a couple minutes without breathing before it's game over. Now you get a little bit longer when you're under anesthesia because your body is in a low metabolic state. But I mean, if that animal's not breathing for 30 seconds, there's something going, like there's a problem. All right. Like, I'm not saying you wait around 5 minutes to see if it's still breathing. No, if it's not breathing in 30 seconds, like there's a problem.
Right.
Like you should try and do something about it. Unless you've been trained to monitor things, and there's some reasons why they might take a little while longer, but for the most part, that's like if they're not breathing for 30 seconds, stop what you're doing and focus on that and try and make a difference. And there's some tools which I'd like to talk about to try and improve a little bit later on. As we continue, there's some tools that I would really like to suggest to people. But and then so the amount of saliva getting in their mouth, the regurgitation getting in their mouth, and then they can aspirate that regurgitation, get an aspiration pneumonia. So that is a really bad pneumonia because you got a lot of goodies. They got food. The bacteria has food that you just inhaled, and you got tons of different bacteria that now just got seated in the lungs. Right. So an aspiration pneumonia are especially aggressive. I just did a necropsy on a kudu female that I believe, I mean, I can't prove it, but I believe it was aspiration pneumonia because of the population of bacteria that were in there. And so they, I mean, it happens even in the big ones. And so heat, breathing issues, right? Aspirating that having their head kinked in a weird position. They can fall with their head kinked in the wrong direction. Sometimes, especially the big bucks, for whatever reason, they start stargazing. They'll pick their head up, and I'm going to lean my head back, and I'll pause for a second. And then when they lean their head back, like they just start salivating, and then they go and suffocate on their own spit. That's kind of a really dumb reason to die. And and then you got the A, airway. Is that clear? B, you're breathing. And then you got C, circulation. A lot of people don't even check the heart rate, right? Just check the heart rate. Just make sure that the heart's still beating. So, on the breathing. So a really good rule of thumb that I like is I like to see breathing every 6 seconds.
Mm.
Now, if it gets up to 10, that's when I start saying, okay, I want to try to do something to improve that.
Mm.
And these combinations of drugs, they have a 2-part reversal. And so you can do partial reversals. Okay. So if you do 100% reversal, you're going to wake them up. And so you can do partial reversals like a 10% or a 20% reversal to try and help improve that animal's breathing. And so, for example, a 20% reversal with naltrexone, which is one of the drugs that reverses, can help with breathing. A 20% reversal of the atopamazole, which is one of the reversal drugs that's commonly used, can help with breathing. And then as far as circulation goes, so first off, you got to check the heart, right? My general rule of thumb, unless you're dealing with very big animals, sometimes like the equids, like zebras, can breathe or can have a little bit slower heart rate. Like if you're dealing with really big animals, which this would be more veterinary based content, like a rhino and giraffe. Sometimes they can have lower heart rates than this, but in general, just keep it simple. You want their heart to be beating faster than 60 beats. And someone's like, well, what if they're at 58? Don't ask me that.
Right.
Like if it's pretty close to 60, you're fine.
So on an animal, like I know on humans, you can like hold on their neck or anywhere else. But on an animal, how would you check their heart rate for the common person?
Yeah, good question. So for a lot of the smaller species, you just get your hand, just put it right on their chest. Mm-hmm. You can check their breathing and their heart rate. And a lot of times your people are driving around, maybe you can't hear perfectly because you got the side-by-side rearing, but you can put your hand around the mouth and you can feel breathing. And then you can put your hand on the chest and you can feel the heart beating. Mm. And that's for many of them. For the bigger species, maybe like a big kudu or eland or something like that, sometimes it can be kind of hard to feel the heart. And especially on some of those big males, they're going to have this big old bullish neck. Mm. And so sometimes it can even be hard to feel on the neck, and you can, but it's pretty deep in there. And it takes, some trained feeling, which for me, I'm right-hand dominant, but I have found that my left hand is more sensitive. And so if I'm feeling for a pulse, I don't feel with my right hand. And you also don't feel with your thumbs. You have to feel with your fingers. And I have found that my middle finger on my left hand is more sensitive at feeling pulses and finding veins.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's after feeling tens of thousands of vessels. I just have discovered that about myself, right, is that I can feel veins much better. So if I lose this, I'm screwed.
Right.
Not only will I not be able to play guitar, but I won't be able to find a vein. But so yes, you can feel up here. And then on some animals, you can pretty easily feel there's not on humans necessarily, but there's an artery that crosses right under the jaw that kind of takes a dip up. I guess I'll show this side. It comes up here and then it goes right under, and you can kind of feel it cross under the jaw. And so sometimes you can, on some animals, you can feel that one.
Interesting.
Pretty comfortably. You can get a stethoscope too.
Right.
Like, I can plug a stethoscope if you want. Littman is a really good option, but you don't even have to have a good stethoscope. But like, you should do something to try and feel. Like, if you are struggling to feel the heart rate on that animal, then figure out another way. And a stethoscope is a good answer.
Right. And so I don't even know if I have a speculation, but how do you count the beats per minute?
Oh, good question. So if you're feeling a pulse, you will feel one pulse. It'll be like doot, doot,
right,
doot, right? So that would be one beat. Right? Is that doot that you're feeling. And in general, don't make this super complicated. If your heart rate is beating one beat per second, you're at 60.
Right.
Right? Because take it all the way around. That's 60. So I don't care if it is 72 or 76 or if it is 58 or 60. Just set a simple rule that if it is above 1 beat per second, you're good. If it is below 1 beat per second, you might have problems. If it is 1 beat every 2 seconds, you have a problem. Okay? That's 30 beats a minute. 1 beat every 2 seconds. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay. So if you're at one heartbeat every, if you're at one heartbeat every 2 seconds, which would be 30 beats a minute, then that's too slow. That's too slow. The body's not getting oxygen. So then all of a sudden that animal wakes up and it's shaking its head and its eyes are acting crazy, and and a week later it dies of kidney failure, or it can't get up and it's just sitting paddling. It's not because of capture myopathy, right? That's the kind of catch-all term. No, it is from low oxygen to the brain or low oxygen to the kidneys. That's why it died. And so those neurological signs that you're seeing, it's because it didn't get oxygen and it has brain damage.
Right.
And so one thing that can be confusing for people is when they're listening to the heart. So the heart has a couple heart sounds. Most people don't know that it has a couple, but the main ones that you'll hear are what they kind of term as like your lub dub, L-U-B, D-U-B. So your lub dub. So one heartbeat is duku, 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 right? So that's one. Duku is those two sounds. And so if you're listening with a stethoscope and you put it on the chest, you will hear that duku. That's one. Duku. That's two. Duku. That's three. And so don't count that as like, oh, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? No, that's 3. And so when you're hearing that, again, just don't sit there and count for 10, 15, 20 seconds. Just, is it faster or slower than 1 beat per second? And as far as breathing goes, kind of already classified that. That's pretty straightforward. It's 6 seconds is my target.
Right.
A little bit faster than that, the animal might be light. Just be careful. It might be a little bit light. Like if it's like, then that might be a little bit light. Be careful. You might be
well, and that's good to know, because even when I was the guy in the back of the Ranger, I was always told, hey, make sure they're breathing. But even that little common practice of, hey, breathing every 6 seconds is like, that's good to know. Yeah. Because as a kid, I was always just like staring at them like, okay, they breathing. Yeah. But I was like,
thank goodness.
Yeah. It's like, okay, so that's a good thing to know. Or even if I'm out on a job, knowing like, hey, because we've been on jobs and unfortunately stuff has happened, and they asked me, they're like, well, hey, you go to a bunch of places. Do you know what could have caused this? And again, I said, I'll give them my opinion. I'm not a vet. I don't know. But it's just, my first thought was like, man, did you check if they were breathing? Yeah. Like, it sounds like a silly thing. Like the other day, my aunt called me. She was taking our work truck to get fixed, and she was like, hey, every time I start the truck, it's just the RPMs are shooting through the roof. And I just said, well, it sounds silly. Is there anything on the accelerator? She's like, I cleaned the floor mats and I put it on wrong. And but I was like, so it sounds silly to ask the basic questions, but that's where I typically start, is I go, did you check if they were breathing before they quit breathing forever? Yeah. And so I try to break it down pretty simply, because I think if you know what to look for, it can be simple. Yeah. And because, like you said, it's the ABCs of keeping them alive. And so
when I just noticed that when we were talking about temperature, I forgot to tell people a range and what to do about it. So the safe range for these animals, or I guess a target range, is 100 to 102. Okay. So that's Fahrenheit. We're in America. I'm not too good at Celsius, right? We can look it up. We can put we can put the link to a converter in the bio.
Yeah, you can Google it. We got computers in our pockets.
So yeah, 100 to 102 is ideal. So what about outside that range? How worried should we be? Okay, well, let's go on the high end of the range. 103, don't worry about it. 104, don't worry about it. It's okay. It's fine. But you do need to note that it is 103, and you do need to be making sure that it doesn't go up.
Right, and how quickly.
Yeah, because now you're already on the high end of the range. As you do need to note that it is 104, but the animal's not going to experience major negative side effects from that. Okay. Now, again, a lot of this stuff is subjective, right? So there's going to be people that would probably disagree with me, and that is okay. I'm okay with that. So at 104, like I said, you need to just say, okay, like, yeah, I mean, put the animal in shade, but it's not going to die from that. Okay. If it's like 105, you need to start trying to cool it. Okay. And you can even start cooling at 104. I'm not saying like just sit on your hands and don't do anything at 104. Like I'm saying, don't freak out. Like you can still put them on the side-by-side or in the truck or in the trailer and it is okay. Like you don't have to stop the whole operation to you can just know that they're hot.
Right.
And then at 105, you need to start cooling them, right? So, you put some water on them. You can put some alcohol on them. You can use a cold water enema. That is something that a lot of people like. You can put some ice up their tush as well. The challenge with that is now you don't know what their temperature is anymore. You don't know what the cold core temperature because you have a thermometer, which a lot of people don't even carry a thermometer.
Well, that was going to be my next question is how do you, it sounds silly, but again, start at the basics is how do you take their temperature?
Yeah. Well,
is it just a
you get a
thermometer
and you stick it up the tush. It's not a rectal thermometer. It is a
normal
store-bought thermometer. Me personally, I like the blue Vicks one. It's this flexible tip. It has a really nice screen. And that is my preferred option. I like it. I carry
like CVS.
Yeah. You can get it from Amazon too. It's blue. It's like a sky blue or light blue color, and it's just by Vicks. That is my favorite one. It reads super fast. I like a fast read because I don't want to be sitting there for 15, 20 seconds trying to get a temperature. I want to put it in and then know where they're at. It's quick, and the Vicks thermometer is really good. It's really easy to change the battery too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's just a little tip. And so then going up at 106, that's a big deal. We have to focus on cooling them down. And anything above 106, huge deal. Life and death. Like stop everything for that animal and cool it off. You have to. It will literally cook. I mean, once they're up 108, 109, if you're looking at the thermometer and it says high, that is above 109. Whatever temperature they're actually at, it's above that.
It's too high.
Definitely high. And unfortunately, if you work an animal to where it gets up that high, if they're not, there are some species like that can handle high temperatures, like a Gemsbok can handle high temperatures. I've seen a Gemsbok at 108, and we got super aggressive at cooling it down, but it survived. It made it okay. So there are some that are hardier than others.
And so when you're saying pour water on them, you just take a water bottle out of the cooler, start drenching them?
Yeah, so my personal favorite way to do it is a lot of times you'll have things to drink, and you can put alcohol as well. But the act of putting that cold liquid on them is not too cool. It's not very cooling.
Right.
It's the evaporation.
Really?
Yep. So you can put some cold liquid on there and that will have some effect, but that water will warm up pretty quickly. And then if you don't have air movement, then you get hot. Where, like if you put somebody in, if they're wet, and then you go and you put them in a room that's the same temperature as, like, let's say you had two rooms, right? One with airflow and one with no airflow. The person that is wet with no airflow will be hotter than the person that is not wet with no airflow. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then when you're, so you will feel hotter. Then on the other hand, the person that is wet with airflow versus the person that is not wet with airflow, the person that has water on them with airflow will feel cooler. So you feel more extreme. So that's kind of where humidity comes into play, right? So if it's less humid, you feel...
Man, I never even considered that of geographically where you're at in, let's just say Texas, because that's where we're at. But like geographically where you're at, the humidity plays a factor into, like, saying it out loud, it makes sense, but not to the scientific part of what you're talking about. Because I was just like, I just know 100%. In humid temperatures, I just know you're sweating more and animals can't sweat and it's hot, but that makes sense.
So I carry around with me this little portable Bluetooth thermometer. It's like $10 on Amazon. It's not special. And I will maybe hang it up in a trailer. It's in my backpack, and when I find I have a couple of them, and I just accept the fact that I'm gonna lose them here and there. I lost one this weekend, or I lost one two or 3 days ago because I put it in someone's trailer because we wanted to monitor what the temperature was in the trailer. And, so we said, hey, if it gets over 80 degrees in the trailer, you're leaving. And it did. It got, once we saw it, okay, 82, you're gone. Have a good day. And so we,
and so when you're saying they're leaving, it's because they have animals in the stalls.
The animals in the trailer. Yeah. And it's getting too hot.
Yeah.
Too hot with little airflow in the trailer, that's a bad recipe. But so yeah, I mean, you need to check. So going back to my favorite way to cool the animals, this is by far my favorite way. I get a bottle that's a lot of times like in an ice box or what is it? Cooler. Yeah, cooler. I don't know why. I was in South Africa and they call them cool boxes.
Cool boxes.
Yeah. So I was like, wait, that's not what we call it. So yeah, in a cooler, and I'll get my knife and just poke a hole in the top, and then I have a leaf blower, and I take the tip off the leaf blower, so it's only like the core. I just point it at the animal. I start squeezing it. Now I have a portable misting machine, and I just blow it right at the animal, get it wet, and then once the animal's wet, I'll stop and I just keep blowing until the animal gets dry, and then I'll just squeeze some more. And so now I have this portable misting machine that's blowing like super fast air at the animal. That is my preferred way to do it. It works very well.
So would it be beneficial if, I guess it all depends on where you're sedating the animals and everything, but if you're near a shop, if they have one of those big shop fans, would you recommend just blowing that on the animal while they're down? Or
yeah, that's going to be case specific. Like most of the time when you're on a location, you don't really have access to electricity.
Right.
You don't have, I mean, some trailers will, maybe they'll have, a little generator or something like that. But a lot of times you have to figure out how to accomplish that with a battery powered option. And there are some fans that are battery powered, and that is nice.
But I feel like they're not big fans.
Yeah. Well, some of them, I bought into the Ryobi system, right? I don't make anything from it, but that's what I bought because you buy your batteries, and
right?
You don't want to go and buy a bunch of different. Right? So Ryobi does have a fan that you can put your weed eater battery on and turn it on. It'll power it for a couple hours or whatever. That's not what I use. I just use a leaf blower.
Yeah.
And like I said, because it has like the plastic tip on it that makes it like 3.5 feet long. Right. Well, I take that off. So I only use the core. And so that's what I have in my car right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super helpful.
Yeah. But a cold water animal is really good. You want to focus on the head. If they're a horned animal, you can put it on the horns. That they dissipate heat that way.
Really?
An antler animal does not. So there's no point in in a whitetail or a fallow. There's no point in once they're hard horned to put it on there. If they're in velvet, you can, but you shouldn't really be capturing in velvet most of the time.
Yeah.
Because they'll tear it up. But yeah, if they're a horned animal, you can put it on the horn, and that will help dissipate heat. But on the head, on the neck, on the ears, on the legs, what it's been shown is if you just put ice on the animal, a lot of times it doesn't help quite as much because it gets like so cold right there that it actually causes the vessels to contract and to constrict so that it doesn't circulate quite as well. But evaporative cooling works really well. And then, like I said earlier, you can't do a cold water enema. It's just once you do that, now you're going to put your thermometer up there.
Right.
It's going to take some time for that to.
It's going to say 70 degrees.
Yeah. Right. It's going to say low.
Right.
Yeah.
Man. Well, I want to take a break real quick.
Okay.
I need to use the restroom.
Yeah.
This is good. We still have a lot to talk about. And we're back. So, so I think those are going to be super helpful for people to take like real life examples, because I've seen it where guys just take a cooler with full of ice, full of drinks. They're like, this animal's overheating, dump it on him. And it's like, that's not going to be as useful as, like you're saying, misting and taking your time.
The intent is good.
Right.
Right. And I respect that. Actually, having a resource is really helpful. Right. So I am a big fan of the intent, and you can do that. It's not a bad thing to do. Right. Like if you get, cool bottles of water and some ice and you put it up, between the front legs and between the back legs, like you're doing well. But, okay. But what about after that? Like, what else can you do? You can do this that I'm telling you.
Yeah. And so in between, needing to take a little break, we kind of just briefly talked about trying to make sure that ranchers know that vets are on their team, right? And so I don't know if, from what I've seen, I think a lot of it is people just associate vets as like a structured entity, kind of like a government deal, and that's not the case. I mean, do you have anything to say on that as like letting ranchers know that vets are on their team?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, people that own animals, are ranchers. Like, occasionally I get the vibe, like, oh, I don't want to get a vet involved or something like that. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, like if they don't have animals, I don't have anything to work on. I mean, if the animals are dying, then, and they get so financially damaged that they're not gonna, continue raising animals, then, we both lose.
Right.
They lose the money on the animal, and I don't have any animals to work on.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people are, they think, oh, this vet's going to be $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. What, I mean, like, just talk to them, develop a relationship with them. And yeah, I mean, you need to, I mean, just like anything, if your vet doesn't want to have a good relationship with you, then find one that will.
Right.
And I mean, I think that in general, veterinarians and physicians, which, that we'll use that term to refer to a medical doctor. And so physicians, dentists, they have done a poor job at staying connected with the client. They've kind of created this distance so that they can kind of remove themselves from the inconvenience of having to talk to them and, answer all these questions. And a lot of times, let's be honest, it's, just getting asked all these questions and not being compensated for it, right? Because what we sell is knowledge and information.
Right.
Like that, an attorney sells knowledge and information. Your CPA sells knowledge and information. And, so if a lot of times, it's perceived, well, you just told that to me. It didn't cost you anything. Well, yeah, it did. It cost me years of my life.
And a future job.
It costs me a lot of money in my education. Me personally, I spent about $250,000 just getting my education and going trying to figure this stuff out. It cost me years of not only that, but also experience and seeing when things were done the right way and versus when things were done the wrong way. And so what I just told you in minutes was years of information that I just told you, and sometimes that gets devalued. And I'm not saying that you need to have, some like formal relationship as in, hey, I charge it, per email or whatever. But, I honestly wouldn't work with something like that. It annoys me when I get that kind of bill. It's like, we charged you for 10 minutes on the phone and an email.
Right. And it is a fine line. Cause I mean, same deal with us as people are asking us how to run their social media or how do you do this? But it does kind of get to a point of where if you give an inch, people can take a mile and being able to draw that line.
Well, and what I've kind of resorted to is, when someone's like, question, I just be like, man, you got so many things going on. I just need to see it. I need to try and see it and work through the problem with you. Cause like me just trying to solve all the problems over the phone, it's just not working out.
Right.
And, but I think that it's a two-way street. I mean, like I am a human being. I have a family that I have to provide for. Like when my wife goes and swipes the credit card at HEB, like it is money that I earned that pays for those groceries.
Right.
It is the sacrifices that I have made to be able to get that. Right. So I have bills and expenses too and this is how I pay for them by fixing other people's problems.
Right.
And it's not the engine that I fix. It's not the tire that I change. It's the sick animal that I fix. And just so happens that I have chosen rather than fixing which I did do small animal for a long time, but right now it's rather than fixing the dog, so to speak, I fix the kudu.
Right.
Yeah. But you need to just connect with a good veterinarian that's a human being that's going to treat you like a human being. And, that you can send a text message to and say, hey, man, and if you're working with them and you're giving them business and you're giving referrals to them and if you're helping them, like they will want to help you. I had someone just recently, a respectable individual in his field. And, he asked me a question and I just, texted me the answer, or he texted me the question and I just texted him the answer and, and he said, okay, just bill me for, cause that's how it's done in his world. I'm like, don't worry about it, and he's like, no, like, I want you to know that I respect your time and I do appreciate the gesture.
Right.
I definitely do. But I have already been out to his place. We established a relationship. He paid me to go out there. He's paid me every year to work with him and be his vet. He's given me referrals, so like, this is just a human to human speak, I mean,
right.
When you're working with someone, you have a good relationship with them, they want to help you out. They want you to succeed,
Yeah. And I think that's to me, the hardest part, not the hardest part, the most frustrating part is because if my clients call and they need help with something, by all means, I'm going to do anything I can to help them. What's frustrating is the people who won't hire me, but they want to call me and text me and email me and call the office and do this. And I just tell them, like, man, I'm sorry, but you're not a client. You've chosen to work with either other people or specifically not hire us.
Yeah.
If you want, we do consultations.
Well, and so kind of going back to where the direction that your comment was going, is that sometimes they people may not want a veterinarian involved. I mean, like, my goal is to be where I am valued and to do things that have value. And if someone doesn't want me there, I'm not going to go out of my way to convince them.
Right.
Right. There's such a shortage of veterinarians that are willing to do this work. I don't need to go and earn that business.
Right.
Like right now, there's somebody that has a problem, like in this moment, that cannot find someone with my skill set. And I'm here talking with you.
Right.
And not doing that. And they're frustrated because they're picking up the phone, they're calling vet clinics. So we don't do that. We don't know how to do that. I don't even know what that animal is. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know how to handle that. And even if I did know how to, here, you can give them this bottle. Well, how do you give it to them? I don't know how to give it to them.
Right.
And so, like, I went out to a place. So I'm down near Corpus Christi. I've had people call me up to the Dallas area, and so I'm also a pilot, and so I have a plane, and so I fly up to go and see these locations. But I have me flying all over Texas to go and see these animals that they just can't get anyone to help them. I mean, I fly to western area of Texas. I fly up to the northern area of Texas.
So just the other day you said you're in Midland, huh?
Yeah, I was in Midland, but I've in the past month I've probably flown, I don't know, 30 hours in the last month. I mean, when you're talking flight time, that's a lot of flight time.
Right.
We're considering most people fly, that most pilots, they're flying, 4-6 hours a month, probably not even most, maybe like 4 hours a month. I flew 30 in the last month.
Right.
And that's going up to places close to Dallas and north of Dallas and, up in the, what's that called up there? Valley Mill.
Oh yeah, near Waco.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there's that one, but then there's the one Valley View.
Oh, Valley View.
Yeah, up by there, and then up near Texoma, up over, like I said, close to Midland. It's just nuts to me that people cannot get anyone to help them.
Right.
They have all these animals. They've invested a lot of money. They care. They even want a vet. So yeah, there's some out there that don't really want to work with a vet, but I for the most part, man, the people that I have been working with, they're so grateful. They're so willing, and like I said, a lot of it just starts with, the veterinarian's love for the animal, the veterinarian's love for themselves. Who do I want to be? The owner's love for themselves, the owner's love for the animal, and then that coming together, and there's a beautiful synergy that comes from that.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of it is, it's just how earlier you said it's a human-to-human interaction. And I think a lot of those people who have negative outlooks or just not a positive outlook on working with a vet or working with someone else is they're just looking for a problem. And I think that's a personality trait more than it is a vet issue.
Yeah. Well, and the good thing is, man, there's so many people in this world that you can avoid people like that,
right,
and do very well.
Well, because there's over 5,000, at least the stats that I hear, there's over 5,000 high fence ranches in Texas.
Really?
And I think you said there's like 5, maybe 6.
Yeah, I mean,
vets that travel and
there's only a couple of us. There's not very many.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's some in the hill country area. I travel all over Texas. I just happen to live in the South Texas area.
Right.
There's one in the North Texas area. But I mean, there's some at A&M, that do some work with wildlife stuff. But yeah, I mean, and there's the zoo vets, but I mean, they're employees of the zoo,
right?
And yeah, I mean, there's not very many people that do it.
Yeah. So based on that, how would you describe like the current state of the veterinary care in the wildlife industry, like with ranches? Because there's some private ranches that have a full-time vet on staff.
Yeah. So there's two that I am personally aware of. I won't highlight. Maybe, I don't know if they would or would not want me to do that. So out of respect, I won't. But there's two that I'm aware of that have vets on staff, and yeah, I don't really know much about that relationship. But they, but to answer your question, how would I feel about, or like, what do I think about the state of veterinary care? I will say it is getting so much better. People are paying more attention to it. I think that the increased value of the animals is a big contributor to that. So now a lot of these animals are actually getting veterinary care because there is a market that is tying a dollar amount that says, hey, this animal is high value. Because if that animal is worth more alive than it is dead, it will live. Right. People, for example, rhinos, they just, why are these things going extinct? What's wrong with them? Well, here's the reality. The rhino is worth more dead than it is alive. That is the problem. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, if somebody goes and kills the rhino and cuts the horn and sells it for a couple $100,000, right? $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, then
on the black market. Yeah.
On the black market. And most of it, don't get me wrong. I'm not a rhino horn, black market expert. Right. Like I said, I try not to think about the value on that when I'm actively working with them, but if they can go and sell that for a couple $100,000, right? That's a lot of money to someone here in the States. That is an extremely high amount of money to someone where most of these rhinos are native to. Right. You can pick your country, right? A lot of people want to pick on Africa. There's rhinos other places too. Right. But that's a lot of money in those countries, that are most of the time, third world countries. But so yeah. And so you want to know why they're going extinct? That's why right there, because the animal can be killed so easily, right? Just gunshot, dead, cut the horn. And then that horn is it's small, it depends. Well, you can get different size horns, obviously, but a lot of times the horns are not super big, maybe 2.5 feet on the big side. There's some that are a little bit bigger, but that's going to be animal specific. But a lot of them, they're not that big.
Well, and that's why people cut rhino horns, because it makes it like invaluable or not valuable to poachers, right? Is they'll just saw the horns or the horn down. Yeah, well, so that's one purpose is trying to decrease the likelihood of that animal getting poached, and then also for fighting, you want to try and decrease the likelihood of them hurting each other. But yeah, so going back to the discussion with in regards to the state of veterinary care, as these, if we can get these animals to be worth more alive than dead, they will get treated better. They will have security. They will get veterinary care. They will get, now, yes, there are temperament issues that you have to overcome, right? And that is something that you have to, as a veterinarian with knowledge and experience, you have to learn to overcome, right? You can't just go and you see this animal has the wound, right? Well, you can get your hands on them maybe once a week, maybe one time. And then you treat it, and it's on this, 1,000-acre ranch. Well, you may not see that animal again after that time. Right. So not everywhere is able to provide the highest level of care on an animal that is on, open range. And I mean, and that's, yes, part nature, but some of these places, they don't have people living on them all the time. They don't have working facilities where they could go and treat a wound. Some of these animals, they cannot live
in a small working facility, they will kill themselves trying to get out. They will stress so much they won't eat. Like I had somebody bring me these little pigs, right? They'd caught some wild pigs. Like, man, they won't drink water and they won't eat. Yeah, but I think they're going to die. Oh, well, how do I fix it? So, I go to them and tell them, you don't. They are wild animals. You have to let them go. They are not ever going to be domesticated. They will die in this cage. Right. Well, but if I let them go, they're going to die. Yeah, but there's a higher likelihood of death in the cage of starvation and dehydration than if you just let them go. And so some of these animals, they cannot be in captivity. Right. And so you have to modify your treatment techniques on that. And but that being said, for a lot of these animals, people they're just not informed on even what to do and how to treat these things. So I feel like a lot of the techniques are kind of still stuck back in the 80s and 90s, right? Where like they don't need to be that way. Like you can get an oxygen tank. It cost me $40 to get my oxygen tank exchanged, which means when it's empty, you get it refilled, you exchange it. And kind of like a propane tank. Right. You don't go to the gas station and have your propane tank filled. You just give them the one you have and swap them out. Yeah, so it's kind of like that with oxygen. So, it cost me like $40, something like that, $45, whatever it is. And that's a lot of oxygen, right? So that's something simple. You just put them on oxygen. If you have them sedated, put them on oxygen, right? Costs $35 to buy a little regulator and flow meter to be able to attach it to that thing and give it to them. Cheap. Right. So for less, okay, fine, but buy or rent a tank, that's going to have a little bit of investment, but you can,
in comparison to your animals, it's nothing.
Right. So that's something simple. A thermometer, simple. You don't have to go and buy an expensive stethoscope if you want to listen to the chest.
You almost need to just have a kit that you could sell and be like, who cares if you double the price? If it costs $300, just say, hey, this is worth $700. But then they're just like, convenience. Oh, well, yeah, I'll have this to where I have thermometers and I have all these things in there. And it's just little kits you can hand out. Because most people are like, the ranch hands never go to town. They're not going to do it. And if they're doing it, the last thing, if they're off the ranch, is thinking about what can I do to improve the ranch. They're trying to get a break. But yeah, so that's what I try to think of is like, if you just had it, I think people would buy it. And if you just had those little kits.
Yeah, maybe so. The, another thing that I'm a huge advocate for is vitamins and supplements. And so every time I get my hands on an animal, that animal is getting treated with some sort of vitamin. And I do have a cocktail that I like, but I won't get all in the details, but I do have a cocktail that I like. And, it does things to speed up the breakdown of lactic acid, decrease the damage to the muscles, decrease the damage to the body, antioxidants, things to help with reproductive health. But a lot of it is to try and decrease the likelihood of death as related to capture. And, but yeah, I'm a huge fan of vitamins and supplements when I have my hands on them. So every animal that I get my hands on, boom, boom, boom. And it seems a bit excessive, but you're like, man, you can't overdo it. What do you, there's some of them that you can, like selenium, but for the most part, you can't overdo vitamin C.
Right.
And so it's going to strengthen their immune system and decrease the likelihood of death and injury.
And I think that's just a practice. Like, I think if anyone was to think and say out loud, well, if you knock down an animal, what do you give them? I would say most of them would say wormer.
Sure.
And yes, that's a good practice, but like, honestly, I've never even thought about giving animals vitamins.
Well,
but it makes sense.
So what I have done is, and I give this to all the people that I work with, I have a capture treatment list, right? Like, this is what you do. Now, the next one you probably haven't even heard of is vaccinations. A lot of people don't even vaccinate their animals. Like, they don't even know that you can. They'll purchase this. This is crazy. I did a necropsy on a giraffe once that died of a clostridial disease that was preventable by vaccination. Right? I would blow people's mind how much money that was lost on that one for $1.50.
Right.
They lost a couple $100,000 on a disease that was preventable by a vaccination that was $1.50 or even less, maybe $1. And I mean, it's a shame. I've seen sable die from leptospirosis. And I've seen an Inyala die from leptospirosis. That's a vaccination, a disease you can vaccinate for.
So can you only give them the vaccination if they're sedated?
No.
Or can you put them in like a dart gun?
You can dart. Yeah. I mean, like tens of thousands of animals are vaccinated every year in Africa with this. I mean, I'm talking thousands. I personally worked with a vet recently that vaccinates around 3,000 rhinos a year, every year.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and they dart them. Yeah.
So,
I have darted animals with vaccines.
Yeah. So I guess that'd just be like the next, well, I mean, we're going to have a whole description of it, but I don't know if you just give that to your clients or if it's readily available, like we can put a PDF out there for people to see it.
I don't mind sharing, like this is basic stuff. You know what I mean? It really is basic stuff. I mean, the idea of vaccinating your cow is normal.
Right.
The idea of, we don't really have rabies that bad, but in Africa, they vaccinate for rabies. These animals, they vaccinate them for rabies. So, overall, our rabies situation is pretty good here, but we do have lepto, we do have clostridial diseases. There's people that'll lose almost their whole fawn crop to clostridial diseases that you can vaccinate for.
Right. So what are the other ways that you can vaccinate besides like if someone's like, I don't want to dart or I'm not comfortable darting? Is there things you can put in the food, the water?
So I have heard about like rabies vaccination being done that way. So like they've in areas where they have like coyotes that are having, rabies issues, they do some things to make it consumable. To my knowledge, there's not a successful way to do that for other things. Now, I might be wrong. What I can say, this is firsthand knowledge. So leptospirosis specifically, we wanted to know if you could successfully vaccinate a rhino with leptospirosis and have it be a successful vaccination. And this is not published. This is just private knowledge. Okay. So me and my dad, we purchased leptospirosis vaccine. So a rhino is similar to a horse. So we wanted to answer that question that I just said. Can we vaccinate these rhino with leptospirosis and give it to them orally? Because it is a waterborne bacteria, so you can get it through water. Well, shouldn't you be able to vaccinate it that way too?
Yeah.
And so what we did was we got a horse. We got multiple horses, and so we had our control, which was in the exact same situation as the others. So no vaccines to that one. And then we still brought them up. We tried to conduct it like an official experiment, right? Even though we are nerds, we're just not nerdy as some of these, real scientists that go and write the papers. All right. So we had our controlled, we had the animal that got it injectable. So we got a single dose injection, right? So that's normal. And then we did a single dose oral, double dose oral, triple dose oral. And then we monitored titers. So titers, what that is so everyone's heard of like you have antibodies against this disease, antibodies against that, right? So if you have an antibody against something, that means that you were exposed to it. So if you've been exposed to it, that may or may not mean that you have the disease. In this case, you don't have the disease. It just means you were exposed to it through vaccination, right? So we went and vaccinated these horses using this, and then we monitored it. So we had certain intervals. Well, I can't remember all the details right off the top of my head as far as like numbers and titer levels, et cetera, right? But the basic concept is when you give a vaccine, you give the initial vaccine if they've never seen it before. A lot of them are this way. Not all of them, but a lot of them, where you give the vaccine, and then at a certain point in time, usually between 2 and 6 weeks later, you vaccinate them again. And so that's called your booster, right? So you get your initial, then your booster. And then a lot of times it's rather than having two that are close to each other, you're just doing like your once a year or once every so often based on how long that titer lasts. So the titer, what that is, it's a measure of the antibodies. So if you want to know if your vaccination protocol is still working, then you can check these titers, right? So we that's what we did in these horses. So we vaccinated them, right? We're checking their titers, and they didn't really have anything to speak of. And then we boosted them, and then And then sometime later, we like I said, we have it all measured out, right? So it's not as unorganized as I'm dictating it or as I'm recounting it to you. But so ultimately what we were able to show, at least with this one, which is one of the ones I like to vaccinate for, the answer is no. So I gave you a long answer to your question. And so we documented the control did not have a response. The injectable vaccine did, and the single, double, and triple dose had no response. So unfortunately, I wish it was that simple.
Right.
But I'm not aware of it for the ones that we vaccinate for.
Yeah, that's super. I'm glad you brought that up. That's because I just would assume it's like wormer, right? I've always heard that the best way is to directly inject them for wormer. The next one would be drench, and then after that would be like oral through the water or feed or whatever. And so I didn't know if there was a way to do vaccinations that way. So that's super helpful to know.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, my thought process is, if you're never going to get your hands on the animal, then I would suggest darting if possible. If you are going to get your hands on the animal, then vaccinate it.
And I know earlier you said that we seem like this industry is kind of stuck in the past with 80s and 90s, and you brought up some practices, like you said, just with oxygen alone. What are some of your hopes that the current exotic industry would bring into practice, or any other forms that you hope for this industry?
Well, a couple things. Treating every single animal with antibiotics, that's an antiquated practice. You capture them, treat all of them with antibiotics. I don't treat hardly any of them with antibiotics when I capture them, unless I have a reason, right? That, hey, I think this animal may have aspirated, and I give it, right? I'm not afraid, right? But there's some people, every single animal, if they get their hands on them, boom, antibiotics. But rather than doing that, just treat the dart wound, right? It's a local wound, right? Because a lot of people want to try and prevent a dart wound infection, or try and prevent the animal from getting pneumonia or diarrhea or whatever they're trying to prevent by administering this antibiotic. So, I am an advocate of just treat the dart wound,
right?
So that treat it locally. So that's one thing. As far as another one is like deworming the whole herd with, just switching, we're using this dewormer, just deworming everything indiscriminately. One thing that's kind of a foreign concept to a lot of people is the ability that not all worms are bad worms. Like there are some animals out there that do just fine having a certain population of worms. So if that worm is not that bad, you don't really need to go out of your way to kill it.
Right.
Like there's lots of native wildlife that do just fine. Yeah, and zebra are an example that actually a lot of times they'll do better with certain population of worms than if they don't have any worms at all. But so going and just doing indiscriminate deworming, just indiscriminate use of antibiotics, not targeting specific animals, not vaccinating. I hope that improves. Not giving, any supplements, when you get your hands on them. Like I said, we kind of already talked about some of them, like the various vitamins and that you can use. Not positioning an animal properly, not even taking their temperature, heart rate, checking their breathing. I hope that improves. A lot of people, they won't go and position the animal in a good, safe way where, the spit and the regurgitation can drain out. They'll position them with the left side down. That's not a good way to do it. You want it to be the right side down, which we can go in if you want. But so if they're going to be on their side, right side down, left side up, and that's the animal's left side, right? So if like this is your left hand, well, it's this animal's left leg as well, right? It's the left side of the animal, right? So it's not when you're looking at them, it's the animal's left side up.
I've always heard it was whatever side they fell on.
Well, so,
I don't know if that's...
So the big reason is for bloat.
Right.
And so there's two reasons. So one is bloat, and then the other one is breathing. So these animals, I'll kind of use the water bottle as an example. So, this water bottle is sitting upright. So I'm going to turn it on its side, and that is how the animal breathes, is on its side all the time, right? With its chest down and its spine up. Now humans, we are upright And so our lungs adapt to that. Gravity plays an effect, and the plays an effect on the development of vessels and air sacs in our lungs. And so right now, if we were to turn upside down, it would be uncomfortable for us. Not only would the blood rush to our head, but it would be over time uncomfortable for us to breathe. So when we position these animals with, like, let's say a right side down or left side down, you are decreasing their ability to move, to oxygenate some, right? So if you have an animal that's compromised in some way, whether they're breathing less because of the drugs, or they have some minor pneumonia, or their blood pressure is less because of the drugs, heart rate slower because of the drugs, now all of a sudden you're putting them on the side, you just cut their breathing capacity down. And so now the bottom of the lung, which typically is the gravity dependent portion, which again in an animal that's on its side is going to be on its chest, in an animal that's positioned on four legs, which the gravity dependent portion is the chest, the sternum. So that section of lung has less air sacs in it. And so when you go ahead and position them on their side, you have put the weight of the body down, and the heart is now compressing on that lung, and the viscera is now compressing on that lung, the abdominal organs. And so now they're mainly moving air out of the one lung on top. And so if you happen to pick the wrong lung, let's say that they have worse disease on the right or worse disease on the left, then that can decrease, oxygenation. But, and so a lot of times it's better if you're not moving them to put them on their chest so that they can be in the natural position that they would be if they were awake, because that's how they're going to move the best air. So then the second reason is bloat. So as the esophagus comes in, it kind of takes a turn over to the left side. And I'm sure you guys have heard that, a cow has 4 stomachs. Well, it's not 4 true stomachs. They do have one true stomach, but they have some specialized pockets, right? So that's where the rumen and the reticulum and omasum come in. So it kind of curves over. Well, when that animal is left side down, the rumen sits over there on the left side. So if you do have a problem, like let's say they're making a lot of gas at that moment in their rumen, rather than just burping up that gas, what will happen is the rumen will shift over and it will crimp the esophagus. And so they won't be able to expel that gas. And so now the rumen will shift over to the right and it will start growing. And then it will start pushing stuff forward on the diaphragm. And so a lot of times when these animals are breathing, they don't do very good rib breaths when they're under anesthesia. They do more abdominal breaths. And so if now you just... now you put them on the wrong side, now they start bloating, and now the abdominal breaths are compromised because their abdomen's full, and it's not as easy to get that stuff out. Like, you may have to try and pick the animal up and burp it, and sometimes you may need to actually put a tube in that animal to relieve some of the gas.
And so the way that I was taught, instead of saying like left and right, because like you mentioned, someone might say, well, it's my left, his right, depending on how the animal's looking at you, would you say, so he needs to go on his driver's side? Because I was told driver's side and passenger side. I know we're not going to go into overseas, they drive on the other side, like we said about the metric system, but that's how I was described. Is that a good way to put it? Is like always put them on their driver's side?
Okay, so let's just clarify. So driver's side, we were on the left side of the car. Okay, like wedding ring goes on your left hand. Right. Okay. So then if you're saying that, the driver's side of the animal would be the left side. Right. That's the side you want up.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I said that wrong. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying, because I don't want to confuse anyone.
Yeah. So it's just like some people, they will be looking at an animal, right? And they see the face, and then they'll have an ear on this side and an ear on this side. Well, they will call this the left ear. Well, if you're looking at the animal, it's not the animal's left ear. Right. It is my left hand. Right. But it's the animal's right ear. Right. So try not to do that. Like, don't get in that habit of talking about it like that. Talk about, it's my left hand. Like, just because I'm looking at you doesn't mean that this is your left hand. No, it's still your right hand.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So like, just because my orientation to you is different, like it's still your left or right hand respectively. Right.
Right.
So just call it in relation to the animal. So yeah, left side up, right side down.
Perfect. Well, one of the topics I know that might be clickbait or people want to talk about is it seems like the state is talking about new rules or new regulations as far as controlled drugs. I know we kind of talked about controlled drugs earlier, but before we get into what the state is trying to implement, I want to clarify something, because some people make it sound like there's no rules and no regulations on drugs or scripts that people have to have, and that's wrong. There's already rules and protocols in place, but will you kind of talk about those? So like, if you give someone a script and they have it out on their ranch, what are the rules that they currently have to follow?
Okay. So as far as the new rules, so I don't know exactly what the DEA or that's the Drug Enforcement Agency, or the TBVME, which is the Texas Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners, or the Texas Board of Pharmacy have in store for us. The idea is that, to me, is hopefully we can, as an industry, present information and resources to these regulators to say, hey, look, this is how we're doing it. Let's make sure that the laws are conducive to that. This is a big industry. It's a profitable industry. It provides a lot of jobs. There's a lot of animals moving, and it's a big part of. It's becoming a big part of this agriculture industry that is Texas is so known for. That let's try and inspire them through example and leadership in the direction that they should go to try and help us out. And so I don't know what those enforcement agencies have in store for us, but like you said, there are already a lot of laws on the books governing this type of information. Now, that's not the only thing that affects us. There are things that the state board has in place for us that are maybe not written as a law, but if you want to practice medicine in the state of Texas, that's what you have to do. Now, if you don't do that, then you're going to be in violation of this professional organization. So you may be a DVM, as in you may have graduated vet school, but you may not be able to use your license. You may not be able to practice as a veterinarian if you don't live by these rules that they have created, or these customs, because that's what's considered best practice. And so that does have a big effect on what a veterinarian does. Now, no, a human necessarily, or human, a layperson that's not a veterinarian may not have to risk losing their veterinary license like a veterinarian would. But if you don't practice this, whoever you're getting drugs from may not be able to work with you anymore. Or they may get put on probation or lose their license by working with you, or for the actions that you took. So then with some of the laws, you asked what are some of the laws that are currently on board? Like, how can that person be compliant? Right?
Yeah, because isn't there stuff where they have to keep it behind like 3 locked doors and other things that they have to have?
Yeah, so I'm not aware of like a 2 or 3 locked doors. I mean, what is as like a lay person, I mean, like for my ultra controlled substances, yes. I mean, I won't get into that because that's probably like how to handle thiofentanil and stuff. That's probably not what most of your listeners are interested in. So that is very regulated, but for the most part, yeah, the state, their request is not unreasonable.
Right.
Like, it's a very reasonable request. Like, they don't want just anybody having access to these drugs. Like, they want the end user to be the one that is accessing it. Like, they don't want your kids to be able to access it. They don't want it to be on your kitchen table. They don't want it to be in the console of your truck riding around with you on deck. Like, if you do have it and you are going out to the ranch, put it in a lockbox where like it's nondescript, like nobody knows what's in it. You can put it in a lockbox and so that people cannot access it that should not have access to it.
Right.
You need to have a VCPR, which is the veterinary client-patient relationship, which we already discussed. So that means basically your vet has to have come and seen these animals and prescribed the drug out to those animals. You want to ensure that you have a valid medical reason. Now, one thing a lot of people don't know is there is nothing in the current law that says that you can capture an animal and transport it, and that's the only thing you're doing.
Right.
So technically, it is illegal if you don't have any reason to capture that animal other than, well, he bought it.
So does that mean every person that has darted to transport an animal is a felon?
I'm not an attorney.
Right.
So I don't know. Ultimately, the state is not enforcing it that way. And so I'm not getting the vibes that the state wants to shut down this industry.
Right.
Right. Like they are working with us. They know that people are thriving in this business. Right. And so like, if they really wanted it shut down, they would, boom. And they wouldn't have even bothered with the landowners. They would have just shut down the veterinarians.
Right,
so that, hey, you can't do that.
Yeah, cut it off at the source.
Yeah, literally tomorrow, the state board could say, hey, you're no longer authorized to prescribe drugs out. And that would shut it down. No law would need to be created. Like that would shut it down. Like no veterinarian's going to try and go and take on the state board by themselves.
Right.
Right. So like the state board's not trying to do that. Like they are supporting us. They're working with us. The state board is doing a great job at supporting us so far. And so as far as, felon, not felon, I don't know,
right.
What degree that would be. I mean, it's my understanding that, again, this is my personal understanding, not being an attorney, is that if you use a controlled substance in a way that it is not prescribed, that it is a felony. That being said, anytime you're managing an animal and managing a herd, it's not hard to have a medical reason to do it that is legitimate, right? You mentioned deworming earlier. That is a legitimate medical reason, right? Now, it is also legitimate to decrease stress and anxiety in an animal. Right. So if your dog is afraid of thunder, it's legitimate or fireworks. Right. We prescribe out medications for dogs and occasionally controlled substance that can help with stress and anxiety for travel. Right. That is a legitimate medical reason. I didn't prescribe it out so the dog could ride in the car.
Right.
I didn't prescribe it out so that they could go to Concan. I prescribed it out because that dog gets stressed and we don't want it to be stressed. Right. It self-mutilates, it destroys the car, whatever, right? Whatever the reason is. The legitimate medical reason is stress and anxiety, right? And I would suggest having more than one reason to do it. And so that the capture then becomes incidental. The capture and transport then becomes incidental. Like, well, yeah, we moved it from A to B. And yes, the buyer did purchase it for legitimate. The animal was legitimately sold. But we vaccinated it when we got our hands on it. That's legitimate. We gave it supplements. That's legitimate. If appropriate, we dewormed it. If it's an antlered animal and you want to cut the antlers, we cut its antlers.
Right.
If we had to do regulatory testing, whatever that might be, if you're transporting them and you're doing like TB or brucellosis testing, that's legitimate. Or CWD testing, again, semen collection, oocyte collection, wound repaired, hoof trims, hoof exams. I mean, so just because you got an animal and maybe you didn't trim its hoofs, did you check its hoofs? Of course you checked its hoofs. And if there was something to improve, you try and improve it. So there are legitimate medical reasons to get these animals and handle them. And if the end result of that animal, rather than being released into, as it doesn't say, well, once you capture them, you have to release them on the same location. No, it doesn't say that. But the capture and transport is incidental to the transport is incidental to the reason that controlled substance was used. It's very clear in the law that it has to be for a medical reason.
Right.
And transporting is not, period. There's no ambiguity on that. So what I'm saying is, okay, that's fine. Then if you're going to be somebody that works with these animals, then manage their health.
Right.
That's easy. Manage their health. Don't be ignorant, right? Do something to help improve the health and well-being of that animal, and you can operate on medical purpose or through this and do things for medical reasons. It's not hard.
And so does that tie into keeping a log of what you're using the drugs for? So
there are differences of opinion on that. I do have personal opinions. I'm not sure if it's best to comment in an open forum for me personally on that.
And we'll talk about it at lunch.
Yeah. So I know that in the document entitled "Best Practices for the Prescribing and Compound and Controlled Substances to Cervid Producers" that the Texas Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners released, that's a mouthful, where they talk about BAM and MK. Again, that's butorphanol, ezeparon, medetomidine, and medetomidine ketamine combos, which ultimately, let's be honest, it's going to apply to all of the ones that we're talking about. That they did say one of the best practices is to have a log. That is a challenge, and it's a challenge for people who have been trained. It's a challenge for people who have not been trained. It's very challenging if you're disciplined. So that as like I said, it's on that topic. At the moment, I'll probably reserve further comment until the state decides if they're going to make that into a law or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, let me see. I mean,
but veterinarians though, they have to document that. That is not up for debate or discussion. You have to document, right? And so there is specific information that you have to include. So as far as the end user, if it's the landowner, so there's still some discussion that needs to be had on that, and a law that needs to be put in place, like there is for veterinarians. So right now, the law says that the veterinarian has to document specific things, and anyone that's done their opiate training, every 2 years, like we have to do in the state of Texas, knows what those are. If not, the document that the state board released, it has it in there exactly what you have to document. And so I created a template so that it for my medical records, I paste it and I say, okay. And then so I paste the framework,
right? And
then I go and fill it out. It's like, okay, this is it, this. And so I can make sure, hey, in the law, it says that I have to have this. And so I put the template in there. So I remind myself, oh yeah, I need to add that. Again, I'm not trying to be illegitimate here. It's just sometimes it's hard to remember every single thing to document.
Right. Well, especially like we said earlier, it's not like you're in a medical room with your little whiteboard and your clipboard and like you're out in the bush and you're having to figure out as you're doing it. So you might not recall everything, but having that template.
Well, and see, for me, what I do is it really helps a lot. Is I have a book that it's just a little cheap notebook that I just carry with me, and so when I'm on a job, I just mark everything. So I'm keeping a real time tally that of what was done. So I'm like, okay, we darted this, we missed this, and so then when I go back and I write my official medical records at the end of the job, I'm able to have an accurate account. And so I have worked on getting in a good habit of that.
Yeah, I think it's a good common practice. Just again, I'm a big believer in covering your ass no matter what you're doing. But what are some other misconceptions in this industry, whether it's the vet industry or the exotic industry? What are some misconceptions that you?
Well, so here's a big one. Okay, so I would say this is the one that gets people in the most trouble, and as far as the lay people, right? So veterinarians, it's simple. It's not having your medical record or your medical records complete. And, it's like, hey, you didn't list what species this is. You didn't list how many, you didn't list what your dose was, right? Those are things you have to have, right? So that's going to be on the veterinary side. But for most people, this is going to be the biggest one, in my opinion. It's using drugs that were prescribed to you for your animals on other people's animals in other locations, right? So that can take its form in a few different ways, where you have a ranch and you have some deer or some exotics, and you had a vet come out and you got the prescription, and then your buddy's like, hey man, I need to move this axis. I just sold it. Can you come and help me out? Bring your drugs. Felony. Like, there's no ambiguity. Like, the vet did not go to your buddy's place. He did not prescribe drugs to your buddy. And your buddy's probably not even going to get in trouble for you going over there with your drugs and that were prescribed to you and your herd. And your buddy's probably not even going to get in trouble for you going over there. You're the one that's going to get in trouble. And when I talked to the head of the TBVME enforcement division, they had already indicted multiple people that are facing felony charges just this year. I mean, so this is something they know people are doing, and they want it to stop. They do not want people traveling from one location to another with drugs.
Right.
They don't want to see these drugs on the road.
Right.
They don't want to see them, unlocked and easily accessible. Right. So if you are like, there's not much debate. If you have an animal on your ranch and, animal gets out, you can go get it. Right. Like, if it's like, that's your animal, it's out on a public roadway or it's in your neighbor's ranch, like, you can go get your animal. Right. That, like, it was prescribed to that animal for that herd. Right. So are you technically on someone else's ranch capturing your animal? Yeah, you are, but that is your herd. The veterinarian has a relationship with you and that animal. Right. Right. But but where the state there used to be some ambiguity where people would say, like, okay, I have animals at my home ranch, and I went and bought an animal at this other ranch, or even I have another ranch at another location, right? I have it in South Texas, another one in Central Texas, right? The state has said you cannot take drugs from your South Texas ranch to your Central Texas. Nope, you can't, because those are two different prescriptions. Those are two different herds. They're not treated the same. The vet went to one location and saw one set of animals. He did not go to the other location. And if he did, then you need to have two separate prescriptions.
So that's what the law says, but is there like any major things that I might not be thinking of that's like, say it's for axis deer or sable, two kind of sides of the spectrum?
Okay.
Is there... What are you looking for to say those herds are different as far as the prescription you give? Is it herd size? Is it the health and wellness of them? And if it is health and wellness, what does that mean? Because it's not like you're saying antelope, right?
Oh,
if you're just like, hey, sable, and I don't want to say they're the same everywhere, but to a common like me, it would be like, well, what is it? 10 sable at my Central ranch to 10 sable on my South Texas ranch.
Okay, so right now, if you have animals on multiple locations, so if you go and you get a prescription that says, like, this is for axis deer, well, so technically that prescription is not prescribed out to other animals,
right?
And so, if I'm going to do a prescription, like, I'm going to try and make it specific, as in you tell me, hey, I need to move 5 sable and 2 axis and 3 black buck, then I'm going to put that on the prescription. I'm going to prescribe it out to those 5 sable, whatever numbers I said, right? Those specific number of animals, so that, because you don't need it. To me, it's more irresponsible to say, okay, here's a whole kit for your black buck, here's a whole kit for your axis, and here's a whole kit for your sable. So now you have 3 kits when all you needed was 1. And so, but the state, their goal is to keep the drugs out of people's hands that shouldn't be using them, and to get people to use the drugs appropriately. Right. And they're not really trying to stop legal use of the drugs. Right. And so, keeping that in mind, that, when I make that prescription, I'm making it specific. I'm saying, like, hey, you can capture this, and the things you just told me, right? You want those sable, you want those axis, you want those black bug, you can do this. And that's what the prescription is for.
Yeah. So that's what they're for. And then does your script, so let's say, because there's times where you miss, or the drug doesn't work, or it releases before the dart hits the animal.
Sure, or you drop a bottle, or...
Right.
Sure.
And so let's say that it goes on a perfect capture or perfect sedation to take care of the animals. after that, if they have leftover from that script, do they just return it, or what is that practice?
Yeah, so there's give back opportunities to where you can give the drugs to your local law enforcement. That's an example.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a pretty common practice, where people have like, excess Vicodin or whatever that's left over. You can contact your local law enforcement and they can help you. You can contact your veterinarian too. I mean, veterinarians handle that kind of stuff all the time, but yeah, generally, the veterinarian will help you do it. They don't want us to go and take your controlled substance and then now we have possession of it. And
Right.
trust me, no veterinarian wants to do that. But yeah, so if your local law enforcement has a take back day, that's a good time to do it.
Awesome. Yeah. So with all these different drugs, and as you mentioned, the way that the chemicals combined with the animals to sedate them or whatever it would be, can you kind of go into the drug ratios and how those are calculated? Because I know part of it, you'll get calls times. I know people do it all the time. They're like, hey, I'm going to dart a zebra. What do I do? And I know there's recommendations, but it's not always specifics. There's just kind of like, you have to do different calculations, or how does that work?
So I'm not going to just give specific recipes because I don't want anyone making veterinary decisions based on this, chat that we're having, right? I don't like, oh, well, I heard you say that you give this, right? So that's what I used and it didn't go well, right? So I don't want people to take this information and feel like, get overconfident with it.
Right.
So I will just kind of keep it at a layperson level rather than, going and teaching a vet how to use like thiofentanil or something like that. But so as far as some of the ratios, so there is published information out there that your vet has access to that they may or may not give you. Most of the time, I'm hesitant to just share openly all the information that I have in regards to capture, because I'm afraid that there's going to be something in there that may not be safe, but yet it's written on paper.
Right.
And it could be that there's a decimal point error. It could be that there is maybe that's antiquated information and there are safer ways to do it. So like, I could give you this paper. I could give you this dose chart. A couple different companies have made dose charts, but I don't personally share my personal dose chart with people. If you tell me, hey, I want to do this specific animal, then we will talk about that specific animal and we'll get information on that one. And the reason that I don't share my personal dose chart is because that's where I have all my personal notes,
Right.
and hey, I did this. This is what happened. It was a pregnant female. We caught her from a helicopter. It took her this amount to go down. And like, I don't want people to get that and then get confident with it. And then there's sometimes even when I'm looking at my dose chart and I'm like, man, why was I darting at that high of a level? Like that needs to get toned down. And it improves over time. It's a living document. The more you do, the better it gets. And then you learn how to make adjustments. And so, as far as those ratios go, in general, when you are using a BAM type combo where medetomidine is your primary drug that's doing the immobilization and your butorphanol and azapiron are accompanying that, or your ketamine is accompanying that, because none of the prescriptions that include ketamine, that's not enough ketamine to get the job done. It's supporting the other drugs. And so that synergy is what accomplishes it. But when you're using a medetomidine based protocol, one simple ratio that I think everyone should remember is that the dose to reverse it of atipamezole is about 4 to 6 milligrams of atipamezole per milligram of medetomidine. Now, I personally go 5. That's a little bit higher than what a lot of places will do, but that is my personal choice. And for butorphanol, I go 1 milligram of naltrexone per milligram of butorphanol. Now, some places go less. Some people will do, half that dose, but that's what I do is 1 to 1. So those are some ratios I think everyone should remember right there.
Right. Yeah, because I know there's been times where, and again, I'm speaking long time ago. I haven't actually darted an animal myself in almost 6 years probably. But I would just get phone calls and I'm like, one, I'm not a vet. But like two, I think you could ask 5 different people, like if they're trying to guess if it's mature or if how much he weighs or whatever. We keep picking on zebras, but it's just like, there's just sometimes I think correct me if I'm wrong, but their temperament, because there's sometimes you'll see like 2 or 3 bulls or males that are like pretty much the same, and 2 of them go down and the other one just kind of is fighting and needs another hit or whatever. But yeah, I think sometimes those are just, it's not, I'm not confident in giving that information out just because I'm like, well, I don't know. And so I don't want you to be in trouble or you to hurt the animal based on my judgment call, because I don't, again, I'm no one important.
Well, and don't forget that you can be held civilly liable for damages. If you give someone information and, they may try and come at you civilly, not criminally, but,
right.
It's like, hey man, I did what you said, but, like I said, I recommend just working with a veterinarian that knows what they're doing. And, there are some individuals that are very competent at doing this kind of stuff that are not veterinarians. They've had a lot of experience. I won't go and, put anyone on blast or anything, but there's a lot of individuals that have a lot of experience doing this kind of thing. And you need to get some people around you that have the experience so that you can implement those practices,
Right.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of it starts with a veterinarian, and then as you get further into it, you'll kind of get that group of people that have a lot of experience.
Right.
But a lot of people, like you were saying earlier about BAM, they don't even know what drugs are in it. They don't even know what the reversals are.
Right. Yeah, and kind of as we wrap up, what is one thing that you wish every rancher or just, I guess, their manager knew and understood about exotic animal care?
I don't know. Well, I don't know if I can just pick one thing. Like,
Right.
Truly, I really don't. I'm sitting here fumbling for an answer, and I don't know. I mean, like, some things that come to mind, if you don't know anything else, then the odds are your animal is probably sick from something in the GI tract or the respiratory tract. Like, if you don't know anything else. So look there first. I think some other things would be that there's a lot that you can do to try and help your animals that are not that hard to do, right? You can do some supplements and, capturing, though there is a big learning curve once you do it, it's stressful every time you do it, but once you do it, you get more comfortable with it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to improve the value, the health of your animal that are not that expensive.
Right.
That it doesn't require that much money to do it. I mean, for like $100, you can treat a bunch of animals with vitamin. That's a lot of vitamins, and vaccines are inexpensive too. Like a lot of people think it's super expensive. It's not expensive. You got your hands on them, just vaccinate them. Like, just tell the person that caught them, that is bringing them to you, hey, just send them the vaccine, and like, it's easy to get vaccines.
Right.
So.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for coming on. I know this was a trek for you to come out, and it's been a really good, I think, beneficial podcast. And so, what's your website? Where can people find you at, or what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so we have 2. So at Wilkinson Veterinary Clinic, those are our clinics. That's where we do treat the domestic animals. So it's wilkinsonvetclinic.com. So we do all the dogs and cats surgery, horses, and then my personal website is thewildlifevet.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook right now at thewildlifevettx.com. And maybe one of these days I'll pony up and get something else. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
That's awesome.